Looks like it's working. Okay, this is an experiment, and we are already lost. I am checking this basically for quality of the camera, and I don't know if my head is in the middle of this, but we're going to find out. And also, I need to be able to move over here, and that ain't working. Okay. This over here until I back into it and trip. Okay, can you see anything? This is a large-scale doodle, and I'm also checking the sound. See how well that works. And it's fairly rough hewn. I mean, these Sharpie pens, this is a Sharpie or whatever you call it, Super. And I mean, you know, their line work is appropriate to the scale you're doing. I'm not particularly fastidious, and I have a tendency to sketch rather quickly, and therefore there's always a little bit of a rough look to it, which doesn't bother me. This is actually something actually I'm not one of those people who writes like this either. I'm not left-handed, which is a left-hander's condition. I don't mind the looseness, because it reminds me of German expressionist work, especially I can't find any. I'll sit down. That helps. And those are some of my most admired artists. People like Ernst Ludwig Kirchner and Otto Müller, Otto Dix, and Eric Heckler, whatever, however you say his name, and George Gross. Max Backbone. I always enjoyed. Can you see all over here? Yes, you can. The caricature aspect of what they did, plus the vibrant color, especially with Kirchner, because I mean he was no holds barred as far as I'm concerned. He didn't let any convention stop him from whatever he wanted to create, and he really let himself go quite a bit, and is probably the superior of all the German expressionists in my estimation. His ability to just invent composition and to invent whatever content he wants and display it or articulate it in any fashion imaginable is unmatched, in my opinion. I mean, I know he was influenced by Cubism and Picasso, and almost every painter of that era was, but he was superior to Picasso in many respects. And although I admire Picasso, and of course he's the big daddy of them all, but he never really, in my estimation, because he drew so well, he never really lost that. He never really got past that ability to, it's not so much an ability, but that habit of always being tied to really classical drawing. And Kirchner did, which you could say, well, that's not a great thing, and actually it's not, but it's an interesting thing. And I find his work to be really, really outstanding in that regard. This in itself doesn't really quite reflect German expressionism. I'm just saying that I happen to admire their artwork. I mean, they were involved with social concerns and a period of time. The world was in World War I, was in a rather extreme circumstance. Not that we are not having troubles ourselves now, but nonetheless, I don't really have anything specific to say. So I just do these things, you know, and just it's pretty comfortable sitting there, you know. And it's like, well, when I was a kid, I used to, I won't say I was a comic book maven, but I mean, I obviously bought comics and I enjoyed comics. And I think some of the imagery that gets associated with the comic book genre is kind of imprinted in my brain from my childhood. You know, like this little shape right here is kind of like an explosion, you know, wham, bam, and all the other stuff. And I can't really say I really even had any favorites, because, I mean, by the time I was, teenager, I kind of stopped working with comic books, and reading comic books, rather, until, that is to say, in college, when the underground comic books came out. Now, that was another story altogether. I consider R. Crumb to be one of the best draftsmen ever, and talk about classical drawing. And his comic books, although salacious and sometimes a little disturbing, or maybe a whole lot of times disturbing, are first rate. And he just was somebody who I really wanted to imitate at various points in my drawing endeavors. And he was also kind of a radicalized wild man as far as his thought processes and the imagery that he concocted, but not without wit, because his stuff is incredibly funny. I mean, I guess it depends on your political position on when you see his work. But, so, I mean, that type of visual language is readily apparent in here. I mean, you can see in his things a lot of adherence to 30s style animated cartoons, and that kind of drawing style, the little dumpy cars and the funny little characters with exaggerated feet, and I mean, it's just fantastic drawing is what it is. It's really excellent. And he did a great series on the great blues masters, which I thought was a very interesting endeavor. And maybe I could buy some of those cards. That might be pretty cool. Sure, they're in production somewhere, or available probably. eBay, I guess, would be the place. But nonetheless, I find doing these drawings to be rather satisfying. I mean, and I think anybody can do them, quite frankly, and I think that's a positive thing. I think art that is accessible to all of us is superior to almost anything else. Art doesn't need to be esoteric, doesn't need to be, it can be difficult, and I don't mind that. I mean, it can be hard to understand, and you might get frustrated looking at it, but sometimes there's a very nice place to stand in front of something and you just look at it and you go, I don't have the faintest idea what this is about. And that kind of disorientation is not uncomfortable to me. It's actually kind of a great place to be because, you know, when we were little kids, the entire world was like that to us. I mean, we would see our fingers wiggling in front of our face, but we didn't even know they were attached to our hands. You know, we didn't even know our hands were attached to our body. We just see something up there and start moving and say, wow, what's that? I mean, after a while, you begin to understand, I guess, as an infant, wait a minute, I'm doing this. You know, but originally it's just like experience. And the amount of experience that you go through at that age will never be rivaled again in your lifetime because you're getting flooded with everything when you're an infant. And, you know, I mean, that stuff gets kind of put in the vault somewhere in the brain. And it finds its way back out if you can loosen up the lock that we seem to put there with our logic. And that means that the creative urge is in everybody, and or maybe not the urge, but I mean the creative library is in everybody. So all you really have to do is tap it. And these drawings are not particularly difficult to do. You just have some serpentine lines. I mean, I can do anything. I could draw blindfolded for a while. I mean, I can't do all this blindfolded, but I mean, you know, that could be a great start. This looks like a waffle line. That could be a great start, which is to, I mean, I've seen people do that blindfolded on YouTube. And it's an interesting way to get the groundwork going on your image. And then you're probably going to want to take the blindfold off after a while and look at what you're doing to kind of, I don't know, if clean it up right or embellish it, whatever you want to say. You know, it's just an interesting thing. I mean, drawing is the initial response. You know, I mean, the cave painters drew, you know, I mean, they didn't arrange a composition, they didn't set it up and think of, you know, are we going to have the figures in the right type of anatomical proportions and all the other stuff. I mean, they had like a need for putting these pictures up there, which are lost to us now, but, you know, and they would, you know, spray paint, you know, of their hands. I guess that was a form of a signature. Who did it, you know? I mean, and they, you know, those things are just an incredible immediate response to the world that was all around them. And they are, to my mind, they're man's greatest art achievement. And I love them. I just think they're really cool to us. I mean, I've never gone and seen them in real person. I think most of them are closed off and won't let you go in and see them anyway. But, you know, I've seen them a lot on YouTube and I find them really intriguing. I don't know why I did the dude, but I did the dude. I'm really into fedoras, and this dude's got a Panama hat on or a fedora. And I wear a fedora, which is kind of funky for a guy my age, but what do I care? And, you know, another thing too is, I mean, there's a psychological component that, well, of course I've been stressing that, but I mean, in terms of the shapes that you even draw, I mean, Yeah, they have references to your experience as a kid with comic books and stuff like that, but sometimes they go even deeper than that. And, you know, they can be, you know, maybe it's like a Rorschach, you know, I mean, a psychoanalyst can look at these drawings and say, oh, well, look at this. There's a serious element of improper toilet training. And, you know, I mean, it tells people things. And it's interesting to me that how many of these common type of shapes and gestures do we all share in common? You know, I mean, they're all in each one, they're in each one of our brains, you know. I mean, we all have some of this in there. This looks like the Egyptian weird little animal that they called God or something like that. And who knows? I mean, you know, I mean, we got we have bacteria DNA from the very earliest forms of life on this planet, and then we have dinosaur DNA, and we've got every kind of DNA in us through the evolutionary process till we arrive where we are. So in that road, in that pathway that we've traveled for millions of years, all these images, all these shapes are kind of like stuck in that DNA. And it's interesting to think that maybe when you do a crazy picture like this, which is pretty crazy, you get a release of some of that early evolutionary DNA as to who we once were. I mean, granted, as saber-toothed tigers, we probably didn't do a lot of drawing, but you know, whenever in the evolutionary scale as early primates we started making marks, that's when it started, and that's when this whole process began to grow to at least in this instance, what you're looking at right there. And this is pretty far out. I will say I'm using my computer for the camera, and looking at the screen is kind of okay. And I intend to research the best ways to go about doing this, because lighting needs to be set up better, and I probably need a better microphone instead of the little pickup here, and a better way to position this, and maybe even a better camera. I don't know, this might not be a very adequate camera. I know I tried using my cell phone, and the memory was such in my cell phone that it said, nope, you get 5 minutes and that's it. And although the quality of the image was pretty decent, although I was back a little far. But I don't know, if this doesn't work, I will look into maybe a camcorder or something like that. I don't know. I'm not going to go out and buy one of those, you know, Cadillac DS, what do they call them, single lens reflex or something, digital single lens reflex cameras. So let's just forget it, man. Number one, it would take me a month to just try to figure out the instructions. And it's just like totally prohibitive, you know. I mean, it's like with my automobile. I mean, I don't even know how to set the clock on the thing on a Honda, because I got a manual, and the manual's got to be that daggone thick. It's like, man, forget it. I am not reading through this thing to fix that clock. I can just say to hell with it, and that's what I do. I mean, I'm just, you know, one of those guys that, you know, you open up it's like if you get some medication, you know, like you need some medication, and you open up the box, and then there's this piece of paper that's like a CVS receipt, you know, about this long, except that it's about this wide, and it's got type that's like about that high, and it's got every conceivable consequence that could happen with that medication written on there. And it's like, has anybody ever read that? I got, maybe my mom used to read those kind of things. But I mean, it's just like everybody takes that stuff and just throws it right in the trash. You know, I mean, they give you a bag with instructions on the bag, and then they give you a vial with instructions on the vial, or a pill box, or whatever you want to call it. Then they give you the instructions inside the instructions, and then they write it all around the backside of the packaging that the vial is sitting in. And I mean, you are so informed to the point where you're completely lost track of everything that you thought about, whatever it is you're getting ready to take. And you don't even know what the hell it is. So you just take somebody's word for it that this is going to cure me. Okay, thank you. I'll take 2 if you don't mind. And I like drawing eyes. I just think that's got to come back from our life in the crib. You know, when relatives and our parents are looking down going, oh, isn't he so cute? And you're looking up and you're scared half to death and going, what is this? What am I seeing? And you start to cry, and then they go, and they try to make you stop crying, and then that makes it worse. You know, I mean, I'm not sure where I was going with that. So bring that up. Oh, I know where I was going with the idea or the fact that I draw so many eyes. You know, I. Sounds like I'm doing a song. In fact, when I get to shooting the final videos, when I do, I'll start another drawing. I intend to put some music in, but I've got to say for a fact that I have watched so many videos that have music to them, and there's nothing worse than the music that people put in it. And it's almost like, dude, why did you do that? You know, you just ruined your goddamn video and with this really pathetic music. So whatever music I happen to put in, which is probably going to be pathetic, I just thought I'd put it in the background so you just barely hear it playing. Because I've heard some things that just destroyed the video you wanted to watch, and it actually seems like that's most of the time. It's not the exception to the rule. It is the rule. And boy, it's like, give it a break. Okay, I'm going to stop this because I've shot 22 minutes. And look at it, see what it looks like.